Margaret had always believed that the smallest acts of kindness could change someone's entire day. At 62, she'd learned this lesson countless times throughout her life, but never quite like this. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and the autumn air carried that crisp promise of change. Margaret sat in her favorite corner booth at Rosie's Café, the same spot she'd claimed every Tuesday for the past 3 years. The morning rush was particularly busy that day, with every table occupied and a line of customers waiting by the door. She watched as people hurried past the windows outside, their faces buried in phones or fixed straight ahead. Everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere important. Margaret sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, and opened her worn copy of The Book Thief. At her age, she'd learned the value of taking things slow. That's when she noticed him. A man stood near the entrance, holding a coffee cup and looking around the packed cafe with tired eyes. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing a simple navy sweater and jeans. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was something in his expression that reminded Margaret of her own son during those difficult years after his divorce. The man's shoulders sagged slightly as he realized there were no empty tables. Margaret watched him glance toward the door, clearly considering leaving. Without thinking twice, she closed her book and waved gently in his direction. Excuse me, she called out softly. Would you like to share my table? There's plenty of room. The man looked surprised, then grateful. He made his way over, weaving carefully between the crowded tables. Are you sure? He asked, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. I don't want to disturb your reading. Please? Margaret smiled, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. I'm Margaret, and I'd welcome the company. David, he said, settling into the chair with visible relief. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. As David sat down, Margaret noticed the exhaustion in his eyes more clearly. It was the kind of tiredness that came from more than just lack of sleep. She'd seen it before, in her own mirror, during the hardest years of raising her children alone. She asked gently, not wanting to pry, but offering an opening if he needed to talk. David let out a soft laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. You could say that. I've been up since 4:30 with my daughter. She's 7, and she had nightmares. Again last night, Margaret nodded with understanding. I remember those days. My youngest used to have terrible dreams after his father and I separated. How long have you been on your own? About 2 years now, David said, taking a sip of his coffee. Some days are easier than others. Today, ... Well, today I forgot to pack Emma's lunch, showed up to her school in my pajama shirt, and then spilled coffee on my only clean sweater. Margaret chuckled warmly. Oh, honey, I once dropped my son off at school wearing 2 different shoes, and didn't realize it until I got to work. These things happen to the best of us. For the first time, David's smile reached his eyes. Really? Really? And you know what? 25 years later, he still teases me about it. But he also tells people it's one of his favorite memories of me because it showed him I was human. They fell into comfortable conversation. David told her about Emma's love of dinosaurs and her habit of leaving tiny toy figurines in unexpected places around their apartment. Margaret shared stories about her 3 grown children, now scattered across the country with families of their own. The hardest part, David admitted, is feeling like I'm not enough, like she needs more than I can give her. Margaret reached across the table and patted his hand gently. Let me tell you something, David. Love doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. And from what I can see, you're present for your daughter in all the ways that matter. David's eyes grew slightly misty. Sometimes I wonder if she'd be better off with her mother. Sarah's remarried now, has a big house, can give Emma things I can't. Material things aren't what children remember, Margaret said softly. They remember feeling safe. They remember feeling loved. They remember the parent who showed up, even when it was hard. As they talked, Margaret noticed David checking his watch occasionally, but he didn't seem rushed. He listened intently when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her stories about volunteering at the local literacy center. You know, David said after a while, I haven't had a conversation like this in months. Most people seem too busy to really talk anymore. Asterisk Margaret nodded. That's the thing about getting older. You realize that connection is what really matters. Not the rushing around or the accomplishments or the things we think we need. To do just ... connecting with other people. Asterisk, when David's phone buzzed with a text message, he glanced at it and sighed. Emma's school. I should probably head over there. Asterisk, of course, Margaret said, beginning to gather her things as well. It was lovely meeting you, David. You're doing better than you think, you know. Asterisk, as they stood to leave, David hesitated. Margaret, I want you to know that you've given me something today that I didn't know I needed. Thank you for letting me sit with you. Asterisk, Margaret smiled and squeezed his arm gently. Sometimes we all need someone to remind us we're not alone in this world. Asterisk, they parted ways outside the cafe, David heading toward his car, while Margaret walked to her volunteer shift at the literacy center. She didn't think much more about their encounter, except to feel grateful for the unexpected connection. Asterisk, it wasn't until 3 weeks later that Margaret learned who David really was. She was reading the local newspaper when she saw his photograph, accompanying an article about a major donation to the children's hospital. The headline read, Local tech entrepreneur donates $2 million to pediatric wing. Asterisk Margaret stared at the photo, then read the article twice. David Morrison, founder of a successful software company, had made the donation in honor of his daughter Emma, who had been treated at the hospital the previous year. Asterisk, but as Margaret folded the newspaper, she realized something important. It didn't matter that David was wealthy. What mattered was that, on that Tuesday morning, he was simply a tired father who needed a moment of human kindness. Asterisk, and she was grateful she had been there to offer it. Asterisk, after all, the most valuable things in life can't be bought with money. They can only be given freely from one heart to another.